howdy folks, welcome to the PNW Vibe YouTube channel, and as the name suggests, I live here in the Pacific Northwest, where we have beautiful, hot, sunny summers, but pretty much for the rest of the year, it's pretty darn rainy. A really nice improvement to our backyard, I think, would be a patio cover. That would allow us to use this, in the summertime, a lot more comfortably, and in the wintertime and spring and fall, we could come out here and have barbecues and not be standing out in the rain. So I went down to Home Depot, picked up the majority of the wood and the majority of the hardware that I'll need to get this thing done. So what I'm gonna do is go right ahead and get started on this, and I'll bring you guys along as I do. All right, guys, admittedly, I am just kind of winging this. I'm not working off any kind of real plan or anything like that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run down and borrow a roto hammer from a friend and drill some 1/2-inch holes in the concrete right here where I have a string laid out, and we'll get to drilling, then we'll do some cutting. So after you get your holes drilled, all you do is you set your post anchor down and you thread the nut onto the bolt just so it's flush with the top of the bolt head. Set it in your 1/2-inch hole, and then you just drive it down with a hammer. Once it seats down flat, then you can take an impact drill or a socket and tighten that down. This is a 19mm or a 3/4 inch socket, 3/4 inch nut rather. So just go ahead and get these installed, and then we can move on to the next step. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my 9-foot post here and secure it into place. And then I'll take this other 10-foot post that I have not cut yet, secure it into place. Then I'll screw a board up to the very top of that, run it along to the other one, and level it out, screw it in, and then mark where it's at, where it's level, and then I'll make my cut on that mark. I'm not gonna just go off 9 foot because I don't know how level this slab is from side to side. And I'll do the same thing when I get my slope right here. I'll just start from the top and I'll angle it downward to wherever I want it to meet with these posts over here. To get my angle, mark it, take it all back apart, cut it, and put it all back together. Alrighty, so it's the next day. We got all of our posts set here. Now, well, that one's not set, but I took it back down so I can make my cut. So the next part is to figure out what my angle for my roof pitch is gonna be. So what I did is I screwed a 2x4 in up there at the very top of that, where the top of my roof is gonna be. And I ran this up to about where I want, just eyeballing a pitch to be. So that looks like about a good enough pitch for me. So I marked it on the post where I need to cut it. And it's also marked at an angle for my pitch. And then I take this post back down, bring it over here, and measure my pitch, which is about 12 degrees according to my speed square. So I'm gonna cut these at a 12-degree angle right on this line. And then I'm gonna have to cut all of my 2x4s for my rafters at a 12-degree angle, or at a 12-degree miter. So when I make my cuts, or when I run my rafters, these are gonna have to have a 12-degree angle on the end of them right here, and the opposite on the other side, so that it will fit perfectly flush up against the runners here. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get them cut, and we'll move right along. So the way we made sure that these two slopes were matching at the same height was when we had the post set, we screwed them into the sides, and we ran a third 2x4 across the top of these. So they were set up like this, and we ran a third 2x4 across the top of them, and we leveled out that 2x4, so we made sure that they weren't sitting wonky like this. Alrighty, so we got the one post over here cut. Let's go ahead and cut the angle on the top of this next one. Perfect. All right, little progress update. We got all the 2x6s run all the way around. They're all bolted up with some lag bolts in every corner. And then we got the gussets started here. So what I did for these gussets is I just set my angle here to 45 degrees and then cut it one way, flipped it over, measured out 2 feet at the longest portion of the angle, and then cut it 2 feet, flipped it over, and cut it again so that it makes a shape like this, like a wedge. And then you just take your gussets, you set them up in here, zip, 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 and zip, zip. I went ahead and boxed this side in. You don't necessarily have to do that, but I just wanted to put a little bit of extra support on this end where the majority of the weight will be because of the slope of this roof. Alrighty guys, it is the next morning. We've made a lot of progress since last time I checked in, but I'm a one-man show here, so it's kind of hard to film and work on this at the same time. So let me just fill you in and make a couple of points so that you can maybe help yourself save a little time when you're doing this yourself. So on these top posts, if you'll recall, I cut an angle in those bottom posts to match the slope of the roof. I didn't do that on the top post, so I had to come back afterwards and cut that angle in it with a Sawzall, and it's kind of a rough cut, but it works. So, and it's not really going to be super visible, so it's not a huge deal, but that's what I ended up having to do on these panels. The other thing I want to mention is, as far as these rafters go, when I last time I recorded, I had just had this box around the outside of it, and then I had that end boxed in, and I was working on the gussets. So I'm not a roofer. I don't know how to build any of this stuff. I'm just winging this whole entire thing. So this was a really difficult thing for me to figure out in my head. But once I got it figured out, it made perfect sense. So what you want to keep in mind is that when you're running these rafters, you have to cut an angle in this side right here and an angle on this side right here, because you have a plane right here that's a perfectly straight plane, and a plane on this end that's a perfectly straight plane, and they're parallel to each other. And you also have an angled piece that needs to fit in between those two parallel planes. So when you're cutting, imagine this is your 2x4. We'll take our saw and we'll set the angle here. This was the hard part for me, was figuring out how to get both of the angles to be right. So just remember that you need to have the angles parallel with each other. So the angles should both go the same direction. So if you'll imagine, say this is one end of my board that I need to cut. I'm going to cut the angle like this, and say this is the other end right here. I'm going to cut the angle exactly matching like that. So my two lines should be parallel. And the way you accomplish that on your saw is you'll stick your board in, and so you're set to 21 degrees. You'll stick your board in, make your 21 degree cut this way, and then you won't move the saw, you won't flip the board, you'll just pick the board up, drag it to the other end, and make the same exact 21 degree cut in the other end. So again, you're keeping the board in the same orientation, you're cutting one side, and then you're sliding the board across and cutting the other side, and that will give you your two parallel cuts for your rafters. Another thing I want to mention, keep in mind that when you go down to Home Depot, or Lowe's, or wherever you get your wood from, this lumber is not perfectly straight. So one thing I ran into is on my very ends here, I have a 130 degree run for my rafters, or 130 inch run for my rafters, and I cut all my rafters to 130 inches, but when I got to the middle out here, these boards are bowed outwards, so I had a little bit of a gap, and you can see that right there. There's a gap between the board and the rafter there. So just account for that. So want to mention that, like I said, I was doing these myself. The easiest way to run these rafters by yourself is to start on the high side. So I'll take my tallest ladder, lean it up against the roof right here, climb up to it, and then I'll take my shorter ladder, put it on the other end where I'm going to have my rafter, and then I took a jack stand that you can see right there, set it on top of my ladder, and ran my jack stand up to the right height that I needed to be just about right with my board over there. I need to be just within a couple inches so that I'm not putting a ton of strain on this joint right here. Then I climb up my ladder with my screws and my bracket in hand, and I hold the board on my shoulder and the bracket in my hand, and I put the screw onto the bit and just kind of zip it right in while I'm holding it all there. Then I climb down, go over to the other side, and do the same thing. Another thing you want to keep in mind is that you make sure you get all of these to the exact right height. So what I did was I set a board, a 2x4, on top of this right here, and on top of the 2x6 on the other end, and just clamped them into place. That way I had a bottom edge, kind of like this OSB is acting as right now, to just stick these boards up to, so that I knew I was getting them up to the right flush height every single time. So that's another tip right there. So where we're at right now is I got all the OSB panels up there, and I screwed them all down with a couple of 1¼ inch screws, and I got my roofing tar paper on there, and I'm just nailing in my flashing right now. And then I got a couple of pieces of tin roof up there that we're gonna have installed here soon. So I think I'm gonna need to run to Home Depot and grab one more stick of flashing, because I didn't really account for my 8-foot run here. So I'm gonna need to run to Home Depot and grab one more stick of flashing, because one more thing that you may want to consider, and this is a total amateur mistake, but I made it, is that your 2x4s are 1.5 inches wide. So if you make your box around the outside and you put your outermost board on the outside, you're adding 1.5 inches on either end to your run. So I thought I was gonna have an 8-foot wide gazebo here, but it's actually 8 foot and 3 inches, because I have a 2x6 on either end, and a 2x6 is actually 1.5 inches wide. So you'll see right there, that is a 3-inch wide strip of OSB that I had to cut to make up the difference, because sheets of OSB are 4 foot by 8 foot wide. So I have exactly 12 foot by 8 foot 3-inch gazebo. So that's handy, but you know what? It works out. Alrighty, so we're up here on the roof now. We got 10-foot sticks of flashing, some roofing nails, and a hammer. And what we'll do is I'll just take my flashing, butt it right up to the edge here, make it nice and flush. And then I'll take my finger and create just a little bit of a gap in between there. About like that. And then I'll nail it in right there. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna set the camera down, nail it in real quick. There we go. Now she's nailed in, and we'll just keep that gap nice and consistent the whole way up and nail it to about every 16 inches. Alrighty, so I got all the flashing done all the way around. I'm getting started on the tin roof here. I didn't do the top here. I didn't do flashing on the top because it's gonna overhang on the top, and I'm gonna have another piece of flashing that goes from the house, and I'm gonna have another piece of flashing that goes from the house down across over the top of this, so there should be no way for water to get underneath here. So I skipped the flashing right there. As far as this tin roof goes, the trick with this stuff is to start in the bottom. So we here in the Pacific Northwest, or in Northwest Oregon, in Washington anyway, Northwest Oregon, Southwest Washington, we have the Columbia Gorge, which causes a lot of wind. So we generally have wind coming from this direction, flowing this way. So what I did is I started in that corner, the bottom, because you want to start from the very bottom no matter what. Obviously water, you want it to drain over this lip right here instead of having the lip the opposite way where water could get trapped underneath. So if that makes sense. You can see the lip right there. You don't want water to be able to flow into that gap. You want the gap to be in the direction of the flow of water. So the other thing is I don't want the east winds to be pulling this, to be trying to pull these panels up. So what I did is I start on that side so that the overlap goes, I'll still have an edge exposed to the wind right here, only one of them, but the edge of each one of these panels overlaps going this way, so that my gap is that way in the opposite direction, in the direction of the wind, and my overlap goes with the wind, and the gap is in the opposite direction of the wind. So I hope that all makes sense. You just want to think about where you're going to start from and where you're going to finish, and what all your overlaps are going to be. It's not super complicated. The other thing you want to do is you want to really make sure you get that first panel that you put down lined up and squared up real well. Because, I mean, odds are the building you created isn't going to be perfectly square, which is not a big deal, but just take the, make up the difference perfectly however you want it. Take a lot of time doing it on the very first panel, because the rest of your panels are going to go off of that first panel. There's no making adjustments as you go, really. I mean, you kind of really just have to go off of that first panel. So just be real careful with the first one and take your time on it. So I'm going to keep slapping some screws in these panels and keep feeding them up here. This last one, I'm gonna have to overlap a little further on this side and cut a little bit of the excess off the end, but that shouldn't be any too big of a deal. I'll show you how to cut these panels when I get to that part. Alrighty, so I took my last 2 pieces of tin roof, stuck them up on the top here, and overlapped it right on this ridge. And it just happened to line up where the edge of the roof here lined up perfectly with this corner right here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run my saw and just take this last little bump off here so that there's a flat surface right here, and that should be perfect. I got a piece of OSB underneath. I got the two pieces put together here. So I'm just gonna make one cut, both pieces at once. And I have them sitting on this piece of OSB and clamped down between this 2x4 right here. This 2x4 is 1 3/8 inches away from where I need to make my cut. You'll see I marked my tape measure there because that's the width of that, because that's the distance between the edge of my skill saw guard and the blade right here. Stick it right up to your blade and you can see right there, we are 1 3/8 inches exactly away from the blade. So that's a good way to make, that's how I make all of my skill saw cuts. I always use one of these guards so I can use a nice, or one of these guides rather, so I can make a nice straight cut. Just measure out what your distance is and you can mark your tape measure like I did, or you can mark it on the back. And it just makes it a hell of a lot easier to make nice straight cuts. Now, as far as my blade goes, from everything I gathered online, it seems to me like the way to do this is to flip your skill saw blade around so that it's rotating backwards and make the cut that way. So that's what I'm gonna do. All right, got my blade flipped around backwards. Ain't nothing left to it but to do it. So I'm gonna throw a pair of earmuffs on because I have a feeling it's gonna be pretty loud. And my wife's gonna go inside and record this from inside of the glass. All right, let's give this a rip and see what happens. My guard got under there and it totally got off. At least it's gonna be on the side that no one can really see. Alrighty, I got these last two pieces on here. And even though my cut wasn't perfectly straight, it's gonna be nice and hidden by this piece of white flashing anyway, so that worked out pretty well. Also, I went ahead and zipped this piece of flashing right here just to keep rain from getting into this gap that was left right there. Is maybe about a 1/2 inch to a 1 inch gap between the tin roof and my siding here. So I just went ahead and put that piece of flashing there to keep this nice and watertight. So this thing is officially done. Alrighty, so I'm sitting here getting this video piece together and I figured I just wanted to go over the last couple things in the comfort of my home. So real quickly, I got all the receipts right here out and I've done the math. And I just wanted to let you guys know up front how much this thing costed exactly. So far, I've added one thing that you guys haven't seen yet, and I'll show you that in a minute. And there's one thing that we're missing that we haven't done yet, and that is paint. We haven't painted it yet. We decided we're gonna go ahead and paint it. That's the best way to go ahead and seal it. If we stain it, we're gonna end up having to do that every year or every other year. If we paint it, we're only really gonna have to do it once, maybe twice in like a 40-year time period. So that's what we're gonna do, is we're just gonna go ahead and paint it. So let me go ahead and show you what the price is. I've done all the math here, and it was $672.73 to build this whole thing. And you know that's an honest number and that's accurate because it's bigger than the rest of the numbers, and I circled it. So that's how you know that that's the real number. So let's go outside and take a look at this real quick. Here we have it, our unpainted, not all the way quite finished yet, but still beautiful and functional patio cover. I mean, this thing is absolutely awesome and it came together super nice. Now, can you guys spot what I didn't show you yet? That's right, it's this bench right here. So the reason I added this bench is not only for looks and for extra seating, but also for structure. Before I added this bench, I wasn't able to have this gusset that you can see right here. Sorry, I only have one hand because I'm holding the baby and the camera, so you just have to bear with me. All right, I put the baby down so I can give you guys a closer look. Now, this bench is just a 2x12. It's an 8-foot 2x12 that I cut a, what is it, about a 3-inch by 3-inch notch, corner notch in it. And then I just fit it right in between these two posts. And that allowed me to add this gusset right here and that gusset over there, as well as this one and its mirror over there. So that allowed me to give a lot of additional structure to this thing. I mean, you can see me shaking it, and look, that bell isn't moving, and I'm putting all my weight into it. So, I mean, it allowed me to add a ton of extra structure. And that bench is included in the price. So for an 8x12 patio cover, it only costed me $675. The only thing not included in that price, is, like I said, the paint, which we haven't done yet, and the footers, the concrete footers. It's about 2 bags of cement in one of those concrete tubes, so call that another 50 bucks. You're talking about a $725 8x12 patio cover. That's a quarter the price of anything you're gonna find at Costco. That's 10 times the quality and functionality of anything you're gonna get at Walmart. I mean, this is a permanent structure. It's not something you have to take down and worry about the wind tearing up or the ice or the rain or anything like that. This is a permanent, relatively permanent structure. And so depending on the size and shape that you pick and the route that you go to build it, that's what you can pretty much expect to pay for something like this if you want to go ahead and build one of your own. Alrighty guys, the last thing I wanted to say is this was not really a step-by-step guide. Obviously, I just wanted to give you kind of as many of the tips and tricks that I, was able to come by while I was building this thing. So hopefully you can avoid some of the mistakes that I made, and you can maybe make yours even better than mine is. Another thing I want to mention is we don't have AC in the house. All we have is these window units right here. We have 2 of them, and it keeps this entire room a lot dimmer. So one thing is we have to use the lights a lot more, but it's also been keeping this room a lot cooler. We haven't had to use the AC nearly as much as we would have normally. It's beautiful outside, but in the house it can normally get a little bit stuffy. With this patio cover, it's probably 5-6 degrees cooler in the house than it would normally be in this exact same weather before we had this patio cover. Remember guys, 3 days of work and you guys can have yourself something exactly like this. Thanks guys for watching. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.